Knock on the Saints door. Quarterback sneak by Tom Brady to the 43-year-old score. He did. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Now spiked that ball, Tom Brady. Who says I'm 43? He runs right up the gut and scores 6. 7. Handoff, run the ball. Fournette slashes away to the 40, to the 35, to the 30, to the 30, 25, to the 20. Fournette to the 10, 5, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Run the ball, Leonard Fournette. Wow, what a blast up the gut, found daylight, and outran everybody. Fire the cannons, get them going. Bucs win. Bucs win, Bucs win. Fire them cannons.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Swords Up Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about our Week 4 game, 38-31 victory over the Los Angeles Chargers, and this is our third win in a row on the season, so obviously we're building up a nice hot streak going into Thursday night's game against the Chicago Bears. But right now I'm going to be looking at the stats and the key players from this game, as well as looking at why we won this game. Now, starting off like I usually do with the injury report, on the Chargers side of things, Austin Eckler was the big injury for them. He sustained a pretty serious hamstring injury, as it's being called, and he's expected to be out for around 4 to 6 weeks and be placed on injured reserve. So obviously a pretty terrible injury for him, and a player that I highlighted in my preview video as someone that I really liked, so it's unfortunate to see him suffer a major injury. Also on the Buccaneer side of things, it doesn't get much better, as O.J. Howard tore his Achilles tendon in this game, and he will be out for the rest of the season. So a big loss to the Buccaneers offense, which still has two really good tight ends in Rob Gronkowski and Cameron Brate. And also we may end up using Tanner Hudson and bringing him up from the practice squad. And then also another injury that we sustained in this game that was pretty significant is LaShawn McCoy, who suffered an ankle injury and left this game in the middle of the first half. He is expected to miss next week's game. So yeah, just not very good injury news at all coming out of this game for both teams, as both teams did lose some key players from this matchup. Now, looking on the bright side, as Tom Brady shown in this week's matchup with the spotlight fixated on him, I'm going to be highlighting him as the player of the game, and rightly so. This was his marquee performance as a Buccaneer so far, and this game really showed that even though he's 43 years old, he's still got elite level talent in this league. Obviously had a monster game this week. He completed 30 passes on 46 attempts for 369 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And you look at those 5 touchdowns and you say, wow, and that's the first thing that really jumps out to you. But in addition to that, the 369 passing yards he had has been the most in any game he has had this season. In my preview video, I mentioned how I thought this would be the week that our offense finally gets things together, and they really did show it that way, and in a big way, especially Tom Brady throwing for over 350 passing yards and those 5 touchdowns really was the main reason why we won this game. And because of his efforts, he was also named NFC Offensive Player of the Week. Just looking at other stats from this game on the Buccaneer side of things, Ronald Jones also had a pretty impressive game, kind of stepping into the starting role all by himself with Leonard Fournette out for this game. He had 20 carries for 111 yards, averaging 5.5 yards per carry, which is really good. Keyshawn Vaughn had his first touchdown as a Buccaneer, which was the 5th touchdown pass from Tom Brady in this game. It ended up being the game winner, so good for him. The leading receiver in this game for the Bucs was Mike Evans, as per usual, with 7 receptions, 122 yards, and 1 touchdown. Great performance from him. And even though he was dealing for most of this game with an ankle injury that he suffered in the first quarter, he really was a huge problem for this pretty good Chargers defense. And he didn't really look 100% after that injury, but it didn't matter because he just kept giving our offense more opportunities to push the ball down the field and score a lot of points. As you know, Mike Evans is a big physical receiver, and he was able to go up and get those contested catches like he did. And yeah, just him being able to stay in this game was also a pretty major reason of why we won this game, considering that the drive that Mike Evans was out of this game was when the pick 6 happened, and we didn't look very good when he was out of the game. Looking further down the list at the receiving stats, Scotty Miller also had a big game this week with 5 receptions for 83 yards and 1 touchdown. O.J. Howard, who unfortunately, as I mentioned, tore his Achilles in this game, had a good performance, 3 receptions for 50 yards and 1 touchdown. And during this game, it looked like this was going to be the breakout kind of game for OJ this season and that he was going to be used more in the offense going forward. So it's a shame that he suffered the injury that he did in this game. Justin Watson, who was questionable to play in this game, did end up playing. He missed week 3, but he came back this week with 4 receptions for 40 yards and kind of was at fault, however, for Tom Brady's pick 6. It was kind of a deep out kind of comeback route in which Justin Watson was running. It was pretty much the same play in which Mike Evans caught a pass on earlier and fooled the defensive back, Michael Davis, who had the pick 6 off of Tom Brady. Mike Evans was able to fool him, and then Justin Watson on pretty much the same play just didn't run the route as well as Mike Evans did, and then miscommunication from him and Tom Brady was what kind of led to that interception. Defensively, Levante David, who was named the NFC Defensive Player of the month for September, was our leading tackler in this game with 10 tackles. Shaq Barrett added another sack to his season total, and he also had 8 tackles in this game. Jordan Whitehead also had a pretty solid game. He contributed with 4 tackles and a sack. Also, Anthony Nelson had a tackle for a loss, and Carlton Davis came up with the interception for us in this game. Now moving on to the Chargers side of things, Justin Herbert in this game showed that once again he has a really bright future in this league. I think he's going to be a really great quarterback in the future for this Chargers team. He had another solid performance this week with 20 completions on 25 attempts for 290 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. The Chargers on the ground were basically held to nothing, especially after Austin Eckler unfortunately went down with that injury. The replacement running back duo of Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly was held to only 16 rushing yards on 15 carries. However, through the air, the Chargers were able to find a bit of success. Their leading receiver in this game was Jalen Guyton. Even though he only had 1 catch, it was a 72-yard touchdown. Also, Tyron Johnson, who also had 1 catch in this game only, he had a 53-yard touchdown. Keenan Allen had the most catches from Chargers receivers in this game with 8 for 62 yards. And Donald Parham was responsible for the other receiving touchdown. His was a 19-yard touchdown on his only catch of the game. Defensively for the Chargers, Kaiser White and Kenneth Murray were the leading tacklers. They both had 10 tackles. The only tackle for a loss for the Chargers in this game was recorded by Rayshawn Jenkins, and also they were unable to record a sack in this game. So huge props to our offensive line for that, but I'll mention more of that later in the video. And then Michael Davis, of course, had the interception, which ended up being a pick 6. So just looking at the main keys of why we won this game, obviously the first one is that I mentioned how our offense finally clicked. They got things going this week. And I mentioned in my preview video that I thought this was going to be the week it would happen, even though the Chargers have a fairly decent defense. This was the week that I thought we had enough time together to practice and learn playbook and get things going, and for Brady to establish the chemistry that he needed with his receivers. And it really did show this week, obviously, for him throwing 5 touchdown passes, but he looked good. Everything seemed to be on time with little mistakes, and the receivers, when Tom was going to throw the ball, when they were making their cuts on their routes, and Tom obviously knew when to throw the ball to them to make their jobs easier, whether it was them catching the ball in traffic and just putting him in really good spots for them, or obviously just finding the wide open receiver to make a really easy play. Just the things like that at the NFL level really, is what separates good from great. Now, I also mentioned how our pass protection this week was really good and that we allowed 0 sacks. So good job to our offensive line for that. That's the first time this season that has happened. And obviously with a 43-year-old quarterback under center, you're going to take the extra precautions to protect him. As you don't want him getting hit a lot because he could be more prone to injury. I'm not saying that Tom Brady is an injury-prone player. He's only had 1 major injury in his career. But you'd obviously like to limit the wear and tear on somebody entering the final years of their career, at least while they still have the talent to be elite in this league. Now, the first half, obviously, this game did not go as planned, and I'll mention more of that in the next part of the video. But I was really impressed with both sides of the ball in the second half. Obviously, that is when we made our comeback from down 24 to 14 at half, and really, it should have been 24 to 7 had the Chargers not just giving us a free possession by just fumbling the ball when they were running out the clock. And I don't know why they didn't take a knee, but I don't know. They chose to run the ball, and it gave us a free possession and really turned this game around. But we still had work to do in the second half, and this is when the offense really got its act together, and the defense tightened things up, especially in the secondary. As much as I hate to say it, it did kind of help with Austin Eckler leaving this game. It did kind of help out our run defense, which right now is second ranked in the NFL, coming off last season, which they were top ranked. And then finally, we had just much fewer mistakes in general. The only big ones were just really just false start penalties on the offensive lineman, and then just a couple of disciplinary issues. I know we got into a couple of chippy situations. Obviously, Mike Evans with Rayshawn Jenkins, and then Ryan Jensen got into it a little bit, but nothing that I'm too majorly concerned of. And I'm not surprised to see it from those two players. Obviously, the way Ryan Jensen and Mike Evans are on the field, they do tend to have this kind of personality. They'll try and talk trash to somebody or stand up to them. They're just not afraid to speak their mind on the field. And that's obviously just the kind of players they are, and not really surprised to see that from them. But yeah, moving on to just the few miscues. Obviously, the shaky start I mentioned, just the bad first half in general. The defense was not great in the first half. We did kind of tighten things up a bit, but there were situations in the first half where our secondary would just be exposed, and there was one deep play. I think it was a touchdown to Teron Johnson that happened in the second half, and then the first half was the touchdown to Jalen Guyton. Those were both big play touchdowns of over 50 yards, and honestly, our secondary just got exposed there. I mean, Jordan Whitehead and Antoine Winfield were responsible for those blows and coverages. So yeah, we just really needed to limit the big plays, and we did tighten that up in the second half. But that's really what put us in a hole in the first half. And also the offense, when Mike Evans was out dealing with his injury before he came back into the game, looked pretty terrible. And from this game, I've pretty much come to the realization that our offense is really dependent on Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and for them to really function, one of them has to be on the field at all times, or else, we're kind of screwed without them. They're really the main focal points of our offense, and I think these few weeks with them kind of exchanging injuries, with Godwin being out this week and Mike Evans not being 100% for the Saints game and Godwin having to take most of the load, it really puts the burden on our offense when both of them are on the field. So if at least one of them is on the field, I think we'll be fine. But yeah, I think we just need to be a little less dependent on them and kind of just spread the ball around a little more. But other than that, the offense this week just did look really good when Mike Evans was back in the lineup. So yeah, that is pretty much it for this game. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Obviously, we're going to be playing the Bears for Week 5 on Thursday Night Football. So the next video will be coming out very shortly for the preview to that game. And then I'm going to try and get the reaction video out on Friday. If not, that'll probably come out a bit late. Maybe not till Monday or Tuesday, as I'm going to be gone this weekend. But hopefully, if it doesn't come out right away, don't be concerned, and I'll get that out as soon as possible. But other than that, thank you guys for tuning in and watching, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching, and go Bucs.